Hi, everybody. Hello. Oh, we can't see you out there, so it looks like there's lots of people from here. My name is Noelle Faulkner. I'm a writer and strategist working kind of in the intersection of automotive design and future mobility, and I'm also the Cultural Intelligence Director at a growth advisory called Present Company in Sydney. And I am joined with some very, very fine people here today. We are really lucky. I'd love to introduce Molly Taylor first. Some of you may know her.
Hello.
She is an Australian rally champion and a global Extreme E champion. She is a mentor for the FIA's Girl on Track program, presenter, commentator, and one of our finest motorsport athletes. Then we have Mr. Michael Masi, who is the man that makes races happen. He makes them safe, he makes them work. He's the former FIA racing director and FIA single-seater sporting director, which means that he basically has overseen almost every element of how a Grand Prix is operated. And he's now the Deputy Independent Chair of the Supercars Championship and the Deputy Chair of Karting Australia. Mr. Michael Masi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have the fabulous Samantha Reid. Sam is on the board of Karting Australia and Motorsport Australia. She's also a former single-seat and production car racing driver herself, so she knows a little bit about racing, a little bit more than that. And she works within the transport and mobility sector across innovation, inclusion, business strategy and growth, kind of our person on the panel that straddles the automotive and motorsport categories. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, give it up. So we're here to talk about motorsport and the future of motorsport. And the thing about motorsport in Australia is that it is so inherently deep in our culture. You know, we are a country, we're a sporting nation. We love things that go fast, we love things that race hard, we love innovation, and motorsport has all of those elements inside it, which makes it so evocative and so cool and so thrilling. So I think a good place to start is what is it about motorsport that lured you all to join the craziness? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. I think you've got it exactly right. We love sport, but I mean, ever since a car was built, we tried to race it. So I think, you know, cars are something that we all interact in some way with every day, and then to kind of take that technology, put it in a sporting context. You've got the element of risk, the excitement, the unknown, the teamwork, the strategy. It's a really compelling setup that we have in motorsport. I think for me, I grew up in a motorsport family. My mum is actually 5-time Australian champion as a co-driver, so the ones that in rally that sit next to the driver and give them the instructions on how fast to go. So they're the more crazy ones, I think. So for me, that my normal childhood was my mum being away for 6 months of the year and my dad dropping us off at school while my mum was racing a car, and I thought that was pretty normal. So I didn't get involved myself until I was actually getting my licence for the road, and it was more a driver training exercise. I'd been to so many rallies, thought it was really cool, but didn't really have any appreciation of just how cool it was to be behind the wheel. So when I got my licence, I did a rally school day just for driver training, and the first time I had that sensation of being behind the wheel on dirt when the car's sliding around, it was just, and still is the most fun thing I can ever think to do.
Michael, what lured you to the mentalness of motorsport?
Unlike Molly, who basically was born into it and was told that she had to do it pretty much, I was fortunate enough that I always had a passion for motorsport. I had two of my uncles used to compete here in Sydney, just at a club lower level. Always loved cars, grew up through and just loved it from a very young age. I went to my first Grand Prix in 1992 in Adelaide with my mum, and then thought, yep, this is something I want to get into. Originally thought I wanted to be an engineer while I was still at school. Very quickly worked out that I wasn't that smart to do mathematics and physics and chemistry and all the rest of it, but got into the sort of more, let's call it the business side of the sport, and started off doing some volunteering work actually with some teams in the Australian Super Touring Championship in the mid to late 90s, and was quite a persistent individual that, you know, ended up working my way through in an administrative sense, and sort of took the path through many areas, through obviously everyone knows from my Formula One side, but, through super touring, supercars, working with formerly CAMS, now Motorsport Australia as an administrator, setting up events, the World Rally Championship at both on the Northern Rivers and in Coffs Harbour, setting up new Formula One Grands Prix in Korea and Russia. So it's been quite a diverse career in all forms of the sport. But yeah, now going sort of full circle back in supercars with my good friend Samantha on the Karting Australia board, and also on the South Australian Motorsport board at the Adelaide 500. So it's good fun. It's an amazing industry.
Yeah.
The thrill of it, I don't know that it can be challenged anywhere. I think we all agree on that one.
It's the bug that bites you, right? And then you're trapped.
I think just to add to that, so I did start on the track, and I started in karting as an 8-year-old, and I didn't grow up in a family of motorsport. In fact, my dad had no idea. He was a bit of a race fan. He was an engineer, so he was smart, but when it came to motorsport, no idea. We went to a hire go-kart facility, where you go and have some fun with some mates. My brother and I, and growing up in the city, we'd never driven a car, so as a young kid, we just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And we tell, you think we're going so fast, and Mum tells the story about you could have walked faster than us around this track. But even at that age, it's amazing us as humans, that feeling of movement is just so addictive. And so we started we would pester Mum and Dad every weekend, can you take us back? Can you take us back? And then eventually my dad came up with a creative argument to my mum that this was going to help keep us safe on the roads, and so she should definitely support us getting into motorsport so we could do it. And Dad actually became quite fascinated. He really wanted to teach us about the engineering and the mechanical side of it. He never had a competitive bone in his body, but he afforded me a lot of opportunities, and I think my brother and I entertained this idea of, we're learning. We really just wanted to go fast, but I'm sure So I'm very grateful for that gave me certainly a mechanical feel, and I went on to study mechatronic engineering at university while trying to pursue a career on the track. And I think for me, when I look back, it's something that at the time I didn't fully appreciate, but in time and having, I remember being at the AAS with Molly as 16-year-olds chasing our dream in different disciplines of the sport. I was always circuit. I'm a little bit less crazy than Molly. That you realise how much the sport is offering you as far as the other learnings that come with it, whether it's public speaking, and I still don't profess to be all that good at that, but if you saw me as a 16-year-old and you could see where I've come now, there's so much that the sport offered me as far as learning and community and the family that goes with that as well, because it's a huge commitment. It's expensive. We talk about there's a lot of cost in our sport, and with that comes a lot of travel, and we all know that travel is, from an educational perspective, is huge. So as time's gone on, I realise, I've been lucky. Michael's talking about some of the places around the world. We've been so lucky to deliver road safety education programs and high performance development, talent ID, all around the world, and meet such a diverse range of people, all really committed and excited by this sport. And so for me now, obviously non-competitive, more on the administrative side with the karting and motorsport from a governance perspective, it's really thinking about how can we also give back. And I've got a vested interest around also, I want to see more women in it. I would love to see the sport be a bit more diverse, because I think there's so much value in what, and it's not about what I think, right? All of the numbers and the stats show that diversity, male, female, racial, every type of diversity and inclusion adds value, and we're in big business. That's the other thing about motorsport. It's at the end of the day, it's a big business, and so when you think about what motorsport has filtered down into the automotive industry, and it's not always one way. Also, the automotive industry up from a tech and innovation perspective, it's pretty cool. Whether it's about keeping drivers safe or whether it's about new materials, the sustainability lens, there's so much there that now, I think about what does that look like for us as, humans and mobility and, things, the world we live in. I'm a big believer, things and people are going to have to continue to move, but I think we could do that a whole lot more efficiently and effectively. And motorsport's sort of the fun bit, but there's a lot of good that comes from that then goes to help, society.
Yeah, and in Australia, when people talk about motorsport, we we almost just think about, Formula One, the pinnacle, considered the pinnacle of the sport. But in Australia, there's so many different communities that are involved in it, whether it's, the big cars, small cars, open cars, closed cars, dusty cars, smoky cars. There is such a vibrant community of individuals in this country. But what is the current state of motorsport in Australia on a business level? How buoyant is it? How healthy is the investment?
That sounds like one for you, Michael.
Thanks for handballing, Molly. I was waiting for that. I think motorsport, one of those, let's not hide the fact, and Sam touched on this, and as will Molly, it is an expensive sport to participate in. There's no doubt about that. From karting all the way through, it's costly, particularly at that upper level. But equally, I think one of the parts here in Australia, and it is global as well, it's commonly referred to in the industry as the drive to survive effect, but that has flowed through to all levels of the sport, not just circuit racing, but equally, Molly would see it in rallying and other areas, that the interest and acknowledgement of motorsport generally has increased. So I think from a business perspective, the biggest one here in Australia is the Supercars Championship, is by far our premium level. But if we look at Formula One last week going on sale, and within 2 hours, the Saturday and Sunday was completely sold out at Albert Park. I was with the chair of the Grand Prix Corporation, Martin Pakula, and their CEO the other day, and if you go back, I think even go back to 2019, not in their wildest dreams would they have ever thought that the Formula One Grand Prix here would sell out on that quickly, let alone, multiple days. So the business side of it, there's, I think, the drive to survive effect, to wrap it up, that side of it up, is having a broader impact on people recognising the sport and wanting to get involved at different levels of it.
Yeah, I think we definitely see that, and I think what it's also doing is forcing all the other categories to, evolve or die as well. We've seen there's the sporting side, but just how much the human interest side, and the entertainment side is important, and particularly from a commercial standpoint as well. So I think it's forcing other championships to evolve. It's showing a great case study of what can be achieved. I think there's probably still a challenge, particularly when we look at the sustainability side, particularly here in Australia, I would say. I'm involved in some international series where sustainability and the development of sustainable technologies is at the very forefront. That is flowing on down to Australia, but like most things when it comes to sustainable technologies, particularly in motoring in Australia, we're a little bit behind.
Yeah.
So I think there's still more work to do, and particularly from a corporate perspective, we can make entertaining. We can show that human side and a bit more of the behind the scenes of motorsport. But companies also need to be being involved in sustainable projects. So I think that's something where there's definitely progress being made, but probably some more progress to do.
Yeah. And Sam, did you want to add anything?
I think one of the things that springs to mind is when we think the drive to survive effect has been huge. I liken it to the Matildas effect as far as sort of women in sport, and it's I don't think we've unlocked this, but I think the real opportunity for the sport and the broader automotive industry is thinking about not just from a driving interest perspective, but in all the roles. I think what Drive to Survive has really done is open the doors into teams for people to see that there's, what it actually takes to run, a world-class race team. And then, once they sort of pulled the curtains back a little bit, people are like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I want to learn a bit more about that. And then we're starting to see a bit more, what does that look like from a supercars perspective? I don't know that we've unlocked trying to capture that interest and then bring it into our sport locally. So we've sort of got a top-end effect at the moment. I think the challenge is how do we make use of that at a grassroots level? And there are some initiatives there, and I think we've got a little bit more time. I think having a strong year in Formula One has, as far as the competition, has kept people interested, because there was always that risk of you peak and then you fall off. The event selling out's obviously a really good sign. So there's an opportunity there, but I think one of the things we've seen, particularly in Australian motorsport, is we do see these peaks and troughs of investment, whether it's, and people talk about, is our economy, are we just not quite big enough to sustain that momentum? And how that then projects across the sport. Right now we're talking about, we've got some incredible talent at the top end of karting, all the way through to Formula One. I mean, we're overrepresenting on the Formula One stage at the moment as far as Australians, which is incredible when you look at our population size and then that distance that we have from here to Europe to actually compete against the best in the world. But then the bottom level of the sport, you sort of see it, everyone goes up, and we've never really nailed having like a really, really strong base the whole way through. So there's still some work to do and some opportunity.
If I can, sorry, one part that motorsport offers over and above any other sport is, and a few corporate partners, to your point, mentioned this on the weekend while I was up at Bathurst, is that on the grid of the Bathurst 1000, you're effectively in the middle of the MCG 5 minutes before the balls bounce for the start of your biggest event. And for a corporate partner that isn't necessarily, and a business element that isn't necessarily used to that, and it was one of the gentlemen from Channel 7 actually mentioned it to me on the weekend. He said, I was standing in the middle of the MCG equivalent of car racing here just before everything started. And he goes, you cannot do that anywhere and be part of it, get into the garages, be in the change rooms. And I think that's the unique element that Drive to Survive has shown on an F1 level, but what we have here as a sport and a commercial, from the commercialities perspective.
Yeah, and it's actually quite surprising when you go to these supercars events how open the garages are and how much you can see everything. Like you literally walk past all the worn tyres, you can see the engineers working on the cars. It's really sticky when you go to the event, and you can just go as a spectator and see them working on the cars in the garage. I just love how open it is, which maybe people wouldn't really realise unless you've been. But yeah.
No, absolutely not. And even with rallying is a next level. Like you're wherever they set up their service parks and so forth, sometimes in showgrounds, whatever it might be, like you are there in the middle of it with cars literally driving in front of you out of the service park before they go on stage. So you are right in the middle of the action of, the heartbeat really of what is the centre of it all.
And I think whenever we get people to events, even, at the best case, a passenger ride in the car, you've got fans for life. So I think it's how we can harness that more, because everyone standing on that grid in Bathurst is going to be a fan of the sport for life, because it just really is. It is that powerful.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to your conversation earlier, Sam, about the grassroots and talent issues. But Molly, you touched on something before about technology and sustainability. And so motorsport has traditionally been a testing ground for automotive, a lot of safety features, a lot of performance things, but we're also seeing other opportunities in motorsport for testing, such as data, new materials, that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about these opportunities that are emerging within the future element of motorsport?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, at the F1 level, the level of data and technologies that are used there is just quite mind-blowing. I was also love the idea of engineering, but wouldn't be able to pass the maths tests. But yeah, it's always been a proving ground for technology that flows on, particularly in the automotive industry, but also, on a performance level, all the different facets. It extends so far beyond that. So some really exciting developments, I guess, that are happening internationally is a championship called Extreme E, which is basically taking all-electric 550 horsepower SUVs and taking them to remote parts of the world that have been affected by climate change. It's head-to-head, quite extreme racing in those locations, but also it's done to be able to test the electric technology, how we can put it to the extreme, not in a racing format but just in conditions and the terrains. We raced in Greenland, we raced in Saudi Arabia, we go through all the different extremes, and that series is now converting to hydrogen. So in the process of testing the hydrogen, will be the world's first hydrogen series. So it's pretty cool to be right at the front line and see how those technologies adapt, because when you're putting them to the extreme and all the teams are trying to find an edge to get one step ahead, so you really are, the incentives to push it to the limits are there, sometimes over, but that's where you learn so much. And then I think also importantly, by creating, as we were speaking about, that exciting racing that showing the emotion, the human interest angle. People are not only invested in the racing, but they're following this journey of the technology, how it can be used, the education about, I mean, so much of it is about climate change, what we need to do for sustainability, but I think what's really exciting about these things is it's more about showcasing not only the issues, but also the solutions and how those will be able to scale across everyone.
What's that like as a driver, coming from ICE petrol rally cars into electric rally cars? So what was it like at the beginning when you kind of figured?
I remember the first racing lap I ever did was in Saudi Arabia, and I was so nervous because this was the very first race. Nothing like this had ever been done before. They've basically got the who's who of motorsport because everyone wanted to be involved with it. So if there's any racing fans out there, we've got like Sebastian Loeb, Carlos Sainz, Johan Kristoffersen, the ultimate champions of all the kind of off-road. The teams are owned. My team was owned by Nico Rosberg. Lewis Hamilton was there. Jenson Button had a team. So you can imagine the pressure is quite high. No one really knew what to expect. It was like the very first lap, and I jumped in and took off, and it was in the middle of the desert. And I remember it was a really long straight, and I remember just accelerating through the straight, and it was the most calm I've been, because it was so beautiful and serene, and it was quite quiet. There was no gears to change. So it was, it was quite a nice moment. And from then, it got very extreme because, as you can imagine, these big 2-ton cars, jumping head-to-head sideways. It is a bit of a recalibration. But then what is also really cool about the electric technology is, from a software and data perspective, just the scope, the performance scope you have, because you can change exactly how much power is being delivered to the front and the rear at what throttle, at what percentage of steering lock. It really, from a data side, becomes so much more techie because the performance options are so much more open.
Yeah.
And I think equally, the other part is, obviously Molly's touched on let's call it the powertrains of cars being at extreme E, extreme H now. But the other part is let's call it from the administrative side and behind the scenes, is that AI is being used in Formula One these days. So the FIA's pioneered in the area of track limit detection, and yes, there's the human element that double checks it now, but equally to try and speed things up, there's that side of it. From a forefront of safety, formerly working with the FIA, that is sort of one of their core pillars, is safety. So the development of safety in motorsport then flows down to ultimately everything we see in road cars. If you think back to the 80s, when I think it was McLaren at the time pioneered carbon fibre technology, where everyone else was using tubular steel and aluminium sheets, and whereas now carbon fibre and that type of technology is a part of everyday life in our road cars. So motorsport as that laboratory for not only the power, the sources of power, but equally behind the scenes of safety, innovation, is actually a critical laboratory, and one that in many regards it probably doesn't get the recognition that it actually deserves.
And Sam, you work across both channels of industry. How does this proving ground, this element of technology, help with consumer perception of uptake?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important because there's an education piece that goes with any new. We're not always quick adopters of certain technologies. I think ABS is something that's, for years it was, you don't want to drive a car like that and you don't want to activate that, and it actually went through a period where it caused more crashes because people would feel it and panic I think there's a big education piece. The role of influencers, no matter what part of our life we're in, it's a big deal, and the following that these start, we always look at Formula One in particular, but for so many other drivers across other facets now, seeing them in this technology, using it, talking about it, and importantly, endorsing it, I think just makes a huge difference. I think the big thing that's very much front of mind right now for us here in Australia is this transition to electric. Are we in? Are we out? We're sort of, and I'm seeing it so I do some work in novated leasing, so retail purchases, and Tesla drops their price and suddenly you just see all the consumers suddenly panic and go, oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong with it? You've dropped the price. So trying to normalise it through some of those really visible channels, and really like electric makes a lot of sense in motorsport. Electric isn't, I'm not sitting here to say electric's the only answer, but it's amazing how slow we have, as Australians, like we love our motorsport, but then we've been slow to adopt electric, and yet electric, one of the big benefits is, you first put your power down, you've got instantaneous torque. Like it makes so much sense in motorsport and in road cars for the performance elements. But just to taking people on that journey so they understand it, we tend to have different buying cycles here in Australia. We like to own our cars, not lease. Like we're an unusual market compared to the rest of the world as far as that side of things. Unfortunately, our slow adoption of stricter standards from an environmental perspective now means that we're the dumping ground for a lot of brands all around the world, and so we're seeing slower progress. And I think things like motorsport can speed that up, because we can use that to our advantage to say, consumers don't want this. Consumers actually do want to be in the safest, most environmentally friendly. As much as I say that, I think we're also in a really challenging time where the consumers almost want more than the global industry is able to provide at the moment. And so we're all looking to tick a sustainability box, because most people really care about it, and it's like, okay, it's time for us to do something, but we're not quite ready to pay for it, and the technology, we're not quite convinced that the tech's there. So it's a really, I think, uncomfortable, and we were talking about business before, it's almost an uncomfortable space, I think, for a lot of organisations who they can see the benefits of motorsport, but then they're like, if we're going to be out there, and they think motorsport, and they think hoons, and they think tyre burning smoke, like what does that look like? Do we want to be part of that? So I think it's we're in a really interesting time. I am really excited. I think there's some awesome stuff on the horizon, but we're at a stage where we have to change, and so no one really wants to change. Like, we're uncomfortable, but that's exciting, and I think there's a lot of that almost forced to do it will mean that we'll see some incredible things. I don't know what they look like, but the next 5 to 10 years I think are going to be really exciting, both from a motorsport but also from an automotive perspective.
And I think to that point, it's that, if we look at it historically, and a prime example was on the weekend, Toyota had a clay model of their new supercar. Now, if we look back 20 years ago, clay models were what the automotive industry and sort of the platform for a new car was a 10-year program. Now, all of the various vehicle brands are spitting something out in 3 to 4 years, from concept on a drawing board to coming out. So everything is speeding up so much quicker. And if we look at it, the transition to motorsport and using it as that laboratory, we look at Formula One in 2026 going to 100% sustainable fuels. Where the automotive brands around the world are going, that they're sort of saying, okay, it's not just electric technology for the future. There is the element of sustainable fuel. Toyota is pioneering the hydrogen element. So it's, from my perspective, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There will be a number of fuel sources into the future. If you're in the middle of Sydney, Brisbane CBD and live close by, you might have an electric car, but equally, if you're out in the middle of Tamworth or regional Australia, a sustainably powered fuel source is what you're going to use purely from a practicalities in here. And to the point about automotive brands, we are the most proliferated motoring market in the world. I think we've got something like 65 automotive brands are represented in this country. This week. And if you go around the world, even some of the automotive CEOs and chairs that come out globally, they come to Australia and go, wow, I've never seen one of those or seen that brand in my own country before. So we're very fortunate, and probably an automotive test ground in many regards for a number of brands.
Yeah, I think I look at my inbox once a week. I'm like, what the hell is that brand? What the hell? And it's crazy how many brands we have here. Sam, are you seeing that on your side as well? Just the sheer diversity of what's happening here in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. The market is hugely crowded, and that test ground actually is really valuable for these brands, right? Because they come in and they're against no other market can they go up and test their value proposition with consumers the way they can here. Equally, there's probably an argument to say there's not enough room for all of them, and so. And I think that's probably adding to some of the uncertainty as well around the investment piece, because there's infrastructure required for the electric side of things, but we also then see some of the big powerhouses, the Toyota groups and Toyota, Mazda, Subaru just announced an alliance to reinvest back into some internal combustion engine things. So that makes people go, oh, hang on a minute, is EV the answer? And what does this look like? So it's both a strength and a weakness. I think we will see some of the big players potentially move, the longer standing players potentially be pushed out of the market by some of the, we're seeing an influx in particular of the Chinese brands at the moment. Michael's talking about 3 to 4 year product cycles. We're seeing product cycles like 18 months. It's absolutely unheard of. And the technology that's enabling that is a lot around like the AI piece and what they can do from a data modeling perspective. I also love though that we still see the clay model. So as old school as it might be, there's they still like to bring it and still clay model it and see what it looks like in the flesh before we go to production. I think from a consumer perspective, there's a whole of life ownership piece that's still being tested around what does my resale look like, but what's the support? So if something goes wrong with these cars, and there's a lot can be controlled remotely when we're talking about an electronic piece of equipment. But what does that look like, and what infrastructure are we leaning on when we are, in our country, we're in remote parts of even just Victoria, which is a pretty well-populated state. What does that look like in those environments? So I think we're going to see some players come in and depart quite quickly, but we also shouldn't underestimate that they might be small players within our market, and so we look at them and think there's not a lot of vehicles, but they are powerhouses back in their homeland. And so their ability to invest and to the value that they see in our market isn't necessarily about what products they're selling. And in some instances, no connection to things like motorsport. Whereas traditionally, if you think about the sport, it was the main, like the top 5 brands in Australia had big motorsport presence, whether it was in supercars or rally and the like. Kind of seen that fragment out a little bit in recent times.
I think that, and from a motorsport context, having like that mix is so important, because we're racing the electric cars, we're developing the hydrogen. Back in Australia, Subaru WRX, and that's definitely not electric or going to be electric anytime soon. But we run 85% sustainable fuel. So I think sometimes there's this perception that if you're electric, you have to be perfect in everything you do, and that's really unrealistic to look at that. And even in Extreme E, we're trying to do everything we can to be sustainable, but it's not perfect, and we're still developing technologies. But being able to play in all those different areas and making them all work as well as they can, seeing in what circumstances one has an advantage over the other, and just being a bit more open with exploring all these things is really important, rather than going, we all need to be electric tomorrow and you're evil if you drive a ICE car, because sometimes that is what you need. So I think that's where motorsport can help.
By the way, ICE is not running on ice, it's internal combustion engine, just for clarity.
Although the thing about the thing about Extreme E is also compared to like Formula E, which a lot of manufacturers have come in and out of. I think Mercedes entered it and went, cool, we've learned everything we need to learn, we're going to exit out of it. And there's a bunch of manufacturers in there now, but you're also driving in very cold conditions, which traditionally aren't great for EV battery, like older EV batteries, getting better in our technology. And you're driving in sand and sun, and so there's this element of real world testing within Extreme E, right? Yeah,
100%. And one of our big partners internationally is Eon Energy, which is huge in Europe. And we actually went to one of their testing facilities recently. And I don't know how I drew the short straw, but I ended up seeing how long I could stay in their minus 35 degree chamber where they had a charging station to test all their cables and how it worked at minus 35. So I didn't last that long, actually. But that's part of the partnership that they have as a big energy provider across the whole of Europe. They partner with us because, one, they want to spread the message of electric and also to a younger audience and how exciting motorsport is and how they can get some brand emotion behind it, but also because it pairs in perfectly, because we're testing the electric technology in all those environments.
Yeah, I love that they chose you and not one of the Scandies to sit in the minus 35.
Yeah, I think that was deliberate.
So I want to talk a little bit about like talent, DEI, and the like barriers to entry. So can we, like in terms of perception, we've seen a lot of change across sport on whole, around, particularly around how it's communicated, marketed, how it's governed. What are some of the wider societal factors that are shaping behaviour within motorsport right now?
I'll let one of you two start with that one.
I think a lot about this because I think about the push and, Molly and I would like to think we're young, but when Molly and I were coming through, there was like Molly and I and there was no one else from a driving perspective, but equally there wasn't...
In terms of women?
Women.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of participation in any level of, the joke was there might be a mum in the canteen and in the timing box was basically where you would see women. And so we have progressed to a stage where it's amazing how many women, girls, families are coming out to watch at a karting level. One of the things that I've really noticed, and this isn't directly answering your question, but it caught my attention was about, it feels like as a society, we've reached a point where we actually now want to see a woman in Formula One. It was sort of a few people, back a decade ago and sort of 2 decades, and, this has been going on. There's been women in motorsport since well before that. And there was it'd be pretty cool for marketing if, we could get a woman up there because we talk about, but I don't think they can really do it. So there was a lot of barriers, particularly in the top end of the sport. I feel like we've finally reached a stage where there's a belief by most people that it can be done, but a will, like there's an audience of people now like really cheering them on. And I think that's a really important thing because it's so isolating to be in a minority group. And, I'm only in like male, female, but there's so many other combinations that it's so much harder for different individuals. We've got a lot of work to do to think about how we break down those barriers. And I think I love the catch cry of the women in automotive, which is coincidentally it's shared also with like the Breast Cancer Network and the like, but they talk about being stronger together. And I think that's a big part of also there's almost like a mass point where initially everyone's competing against each other. In fact, I think I'm going to point back again. It was like there was probably only room for Molly or I. We weren't even in the same discipline, but it was like there's probably not enough sponsors for us both to succeed. Whereas now it's a case of actually we recognise that there's a program required for this and there's a program required and it's not about competing against one another, but if we all do our bit collectively, we'll help the greater cause. I really, really love More Than Equal is an organisation over in the UK that's doing a lot of research into like the data behind can a woman do this? There's a belief that a woman can succeed on the Formula One grid, but they want to really know like what is it? What does it take? And it's a research project essentially.
That's crazy.
It's so cool.
There's research
More Than Equal. Look it up. MTE. David Coulthard's behind one of the co-founders behind it. And we're super lucky. We've got an Australian talent, Lana Flack, that's part of the 6 drivers that they've chosen in their first round to research and follow their journey. But one of the really cool things that their CEO said that I thought summed up, because we always talk, women, we give them extra attention and all the rest of it. They talked about, this isn't about making it easier for women, it's about making it equally as difficult. And I just love that. And I think it's something that's... Again, didn't really answer your question that you asked, but I really wanted to share because it spoke to me.
I think there's part of it, and Sam's touched on this, is that when I was at the FIA in 2019, we recognised together, and the FIA working with Formula One Group, because I'm not sure if it's that publicly known, but Formula One Group owns Formula One, Formula 2, Formula 3, and then equally there's Formula Regional and Formula 4, so the single-seater pathway as it's referred to. And there was a research project done at the time that worked on the basis of, okay, what are the physical barriers or the technological barriers that exist for women and men to drive a Formula car? And it was actually found, in simple terms, that it was more difficult to drive a Formula 2 and Formula 3 car than it was to drive a Formula 1 car because of the way the power steering was and so forth, etc. So that was one of the ones that was consciously worked on to actually remove that physical barrier that existed. But equally, we look at the front-facing side as the talent and the athletes that are in the cars, but there's also the whole behind-the-scenes ecosystem that exists. So, you know, to give an example, we've got, from an administrative perspective, the Formula 3 technical delegate, Jana, is a lady from Germany. So she's in charge of all the technical side of making sure the compliance of all the cars. The FIA Formula 1 team has a number of females that are part of it, and that's the broader element of the benefit of all of the inclusion part. But it's not just that. They've hired against who is the best person for the job, and so it's on merit. So there's all of that extra ecosystem that exists. We've got Claire Doubleman, who's the Deputy Race Director in Formula 1 these days. We've got Janet Tan, who's the Deputy Race Director in Formula 2 and Formula 3. So there's all of that side of it that's also happening. And I think that's part of the, you know, I'm talking from the male perspective, but it's been a huge societal shift as well, of just saying, okay, it's not just that. It's not just mum in the canteen or mum doing this and that. Jana Flack's mum works on the kart. She's there as a, you know, working on her 12-year-old, 13-year-old daughter's go-kart as a mechanic, because she has a pure interest in making sure of, okay, what's actually happening with my daughter's car, and getting that intimate understanding, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, it's something that Sam and I have spoken about a lot over the many years, probably won't say how many, since we first met.
Couple of years that you started.
But even kind of in my career, the change has been, I mean, I look at the opportunities that are there for me now that compared to 10 years ago, and yeah, sometimes I wish I was 10 years younger and could kind of start where I was then now, because like Extreme E is one example. Again, there are 10 teams and 50, so each team has 2 drivers, and it's a 50-50 male-female split, so each team has to have 1 male and 1 female driver, which something like that has never been done before. We've got the, what was the W Series, now the F1 Academy, but this is racing together, and it's been a really incredible experience, because all these teams, I mean, as I said before, they're picking the who's who of motorsport. So if you said, we're starting this new series, pick the best off-road drivers you can, and you have 10-time world champion as an option, like there's no female that can compete with that. There's no female 10-time World Rally champion on offer, but then you take the best females that are there at the time and put them next to those drivers. Like, that's an incredible mentor, and it's not like Formula 1 where your first job is to beat your teammate. Your race time is combined. So you now have these incredible drivers that are the best at their game, that you're sitting next to and learning from and racing against, and the improvement, it's been, I think, just under 40% improvement over 2 seasons of the comparative time. And now when we go out and race, there's the strategy of which driver starts first. So in a 5-driver lineup, how many are men and how many are women? The first year it was always everyone kind of had the same strategy. So the men typically race the men and the women typically race the women, but now it's completely mixed, and the results are always mixed as well. So it's been an incredible opportunity for me, and then also all these teams have been essentially forced to put development and seat time and opportunity to develop the female drivers, because that's the most effective use of their budget, to bring someone with less experience up to speed. There's only so much you can do with the car, and probably to get more speed out of a 10-time world champion. I think they're pretty solid. So it's really changed the opportunity, and not just from a driving perspective, from a visibility perspective. It's been huge, because now there's people that turn on the TV and they see women on an international level competing at a high level, and that then affects the grassroots piece, which I know, both. But yeah, Sam, you do a lot of work in that, and I think it's such a hard sport to get anywhere. And you think about the amount of people that start in grassroots, the small amount that make it to the top. If we have more young girls seeing it as a place for them, which will only really happen organically through the visibility, and you can imagine the effect if Drive to Survive had a couple of females on the grid, the effect that would have. And I had that through my mum, which I never really appreciated at the time, but now looking at the bigger picture, you can just see the impact something like that has.
And I think also, sorry, if I can quickly, the other part is all of the STEM activation that has happened with young girls at school wanting to be part of it. So, looking at a lot of the university programs and that from the various engineering courses and so forth, and having idols that, a number of years ago was the Lena Gade, who was at Audi, but equally looking...
He was actually McLaren's engineer in Extreme E more recently too.
Exactly. So you look at that. You look at Hannah Schmidt at Red Bull being the head of strategy, and all of those types of people, that it's that entire ecosystem. So yes, you've got your athletes driving the cars, but equally you've got all the rest of it, and having those heroes to aspire to say, okay, I can actually get there because there is, that person that I want to be, or that person, or working on a car as a mechanic or whatever. And the whole, when I was growing up, the whole stigma of mechanic, grease under your fingernails and so forth, it was just like, okay, well, that's a boy's job and that's a girl's job type of thing.
Yeah, but we can wear nail polish and hide that, so it's actually quite genius.
Hey, what are you talking about? I haven't had a manicure done lately or whatever. What's wrong, Molly? But no, I think it's an important part to realise that it's that broader ecosystem and how that societal evolution that has happened. And it's exciting to see so many, going through a paddock these days and seeing mums with their daughters there, and their daughters saying, how can I get involved at that younger level? What programs are there and so forth? And it's amazing to see. It's refreshing. It's exciting.
I absolutely agree. I think just to add, and you guys have touched on this around just the barriers that were preventing women getting involved. I think that's one of the shifts we've seen is adoption of more programs, whether it's Girls on Track, the FIA backed program, Girls Race 2 from a karting perspective. Even initiatives such as, we've got a big initiative across karting around respect in karting. It's about cleaning up the environment because, we think about where do parents want their kids to be, and they still often grow up go, well, I don't probably want my little boy or my little girl to be in an environment where there's filthy language and they're not being well looked after and it's disrespectful and all of these things. So I think as an industry more broadly, we've had to clean up our act. I know. And the type of technology's actually helped that a lot because, greasy fingernails, not to say that they don't happen, and, Molly plays in the dirt still, so just, but...
No one's looking too close.
They're not as dirty and filthy and black as they used to. I think the sustainability lens, there's a number of different things all coming together, but really important are the programs at those grassroots. One, to show the visibility, as Michael said, so that they can see what's possible, but also to just give them an opportunity to show how talented they really are, because so often when you're in these minority groups, it's just, the same group of people have done those same jobs for so long that there's not an opportunity for someone, and so they get better and better and better at the expense of someone else that's sitting out. But when we can take them on that journey, and whether that's, we do officials exchange programs across the globe at different Grand Prix, for example, and just giving someone the opportunity to go and see and learn from other people and have that exposure and share learnings, and importantly as well, like build community. I think women in particular, there's so much research around, they're a little bit different. I'm a big believer it's not sort of men and women, we're all kind of on a spectrum, and that if we make the sport better for women, we're actually making it better for everybody and more inclusive. And I think when we think about, okay, what are the different opportunities that we can afford, but also go back to that saying of at the moment, or for forever and a day, it's been harder. So how do we open those opportunities up and over-index to make sure that we're getting more girls through the gate, we're getting more mums involved, we're getting more, wealthy, successful women as well. That's the other thing that, we're starting to see more and more, really successful, independent women. We talk a lot about in motorsport, a big part of the economics comes through from wealthy businessmen that make up some numbers, but it might be they play around at the back of the field, but that allows a lot of the young up-and-coming talent the ability to be able to go racing and still compete. We haven't really yet targeted women. But we've got a lot of really successful women in business that, why not? It's a huge amount of fun.
I went to a Ferrari track day for International Women's Day a couple of years ago, and it was for female Ferrari owners, and it was quite amazing because they were all like, oh, you know, we own a Ferrari. I've never really driven to the track. I was at Sydney Motorsport Park, and there was this one woman who was so nervous, and she's like, you know what? I make my own money. I paid for this Ferrari. I never drive it. My husband's working in Geneva. He's going to wake up in a few hours, and he's going to look at his GPS on the Ferrari and see it going around in circles at Sydney Motorsport Park and be like, what the fuck's going on with my car? Why is it doing this? And the thing is all of these women, the thing they had in common, I mean, that was a great story, but they all had been like, oh, society has changed, and we've seen new and exciting developments within, like, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And that trickles down through in the whole industry, automotive, motorsport, all of those things of like, oh, like I can give myself permission to do this, which is really powerful. But we've talked about women, but let's talk about the grassroots elements. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we still have to talk about the crazy fans, which I'm looking at Michael because he's had his fair share of that. But when we talk about grassroots initiatives, so people coming from disadvantaged communities and the technologies that are helping enable this, like we've seen people like Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri who have come up to Formula One from racing remote control cars, for example. So many of the kids now in F1, F2, F3 are all like sim racing kids. So what are some of the technologies and some of the grassroots programs that are really enabling kids who didn't have a father who could call up someone and be like, hey, I've got a son, I think he needs a look in, you know, which is how a lot of it used to happen.
I mean, I think unfortunately that's still probably the case. I mean, if you look on the Formula One grid, there's not many stories, if any other, on the grid like Lewis Hamilton's. But yeah, there are definitely, I mean, the Racing for All initiative and the work that Lewis is doing, the Girls on Track program, Motorsport Australia have some other karting initiatives that these guys probably know a lot more about than me. So there definitely are ways, and I think sim racing is a massive one. My race team actually started as an esports team, and they still run all the F1 esports teams for a majority of the teams. That's a huge piece. Obviously a lot more accessible. So I think, there are definitely all these options and ways to go about it, but I think fundamentally that still it's very difficult to say that the chances of someone racing at home in a sim with no connections, it's not impossible, but it's still, that is the exception, not the rule where we stand at the moment.
I think I absolutely agree, but the journey of esports is actually incredible. The growth that we're seeing around adoption of those, you know, particularly Drive to Survive, there's all these people, they're fans, well, how do they get involved? There's a lot of barriers. It's not like you grab your tennis racket and you walk out. Our facilities are a long way away, even car, helmets, there's a lot. So, and don't get me wrong, some of the simulators are also not cheap that are on the market at the moment, but there's a walk up as far as the sim side of things, and the technology that's in that gaming these days and the way that they can replicate the G-force, and, you know, Molly will still tell you it's not like the real thing. And
I just say that because I'm really bad at Sims. It's not
Me
really,
too, so we share that in common.
They are pretty good, to be fair.
But they're really cool. Like, I think back in 2012, Nissan was the first to launch GT Academy and search the globe for who was going to be their next race car champion. And, you know, they've been quite successful. If you look back and you look at, like, quite a few of their drivers are actually in paid gigs now. So, you know, they're not in Formula One, but I think that is a very real thing. I also think there's a lot of opportunity to actually commercialise what happens in and around esports. And again, we focus, naturally, drivers, we always focus on ourselves. We focus on the driving element, but the simulation opportunity that comes in and around that, as far as all of the other roles that make up a race team and the engineering. And, you know, I've been listening around, we talk about motorsport and Molly talking about we're always chasing that last bit. It's almost like motorsport's this permission to innovate and try new things. And I think that's a really cool element, that the e-sport side of it, there's so much opportunity in how that materialises with VR and all the rest of it as well.
Do you see that trickle through to karting? Do you see kids come into karting from sim racing, video games, that kind of thing?
We do. I think we're still probably trying to join the dots for different people. I think one of the big dots that we haven't joined really successfully yet is even just social karting through to now competitive karting. Like, social karting, it's still a go-kart, but they're chalk and cheese, that twice as fast in a real go-kart and so much more fun. So if you've done social karting and you love it, please come along. I can assure you it's there's some work to do in the pathways. Like, I think when we're in it, it's really easy to think, okay, the pathway is really simple. You kart, then you go to Formula 4, then it's Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1, and it's so not that simple. There's obviously in Australia, we complicate it because we've got rally and off-road and V8 supercars and Porsche series. We've got some really awesome series. That's also really cool, but it's, as someone starting out, they're sort of, where do I go? Where do I start? What do I like? What's close to me? Facilities are really challenging in terms of accessibility. So there's still, I say challenges, but there's just so much opportunity in thinking about how do we capture these people, particularly off the back of this Drive to Survive wave of, we've got this free marketing campaign that's gone out on mass scale that's driven interest in the sport. How can we show them how cool it and make them stick to it? Because there's so much that they can contribute and so much that the broader industry and community can benefit from.
And I think from, talking about let's call it the journey from grassroots through till you're a professional athlete. One part that, and it was actually one of the guys from More Than Equal who was part of the British cycling program as effectively coach, analyst, etc. He said, here in Australia, you had a little program back in the mid-80s called, and the government invested into it, it was called the AIS. And that was to effectively collect data over many, many years of what your ideal athlete looked like in each of the specific sports and disciplines. Here now, 2024, there is basically nowhere in the world that can give you the picture of what the ideal motorsport athlete looks like. So I think there's a space there. It's just something that hasn't been captured. And I think there's a space there for, we were innovators in the mid-80s, and there's space there to include motorsport and our athletes, and I'm not hiding behind it, utilising the fact that we've got now 2 drivers in Formula 1 next year in Oscar and Jack Doohan, utilising the Daniel Ricciardos, utilising the Molly Taylors that are athletes on the world stage. We've got over, I think we did the numbers the other day, there's over 200 people that are actually representing Australia on a world championship level in motorsport in both 2 and 4 wheels. So, for a country that's at the bottom of the world, we actually well and truly bat above where we are. Molly's been a leader in this area for many, many years, even though you've been racing since you were like 5 years old, Moll, but Molly has been a leader, and we need to encourage that and invest in that. So we've got truly the next Oscar, the next Jack Doohan that's coming through the process, the next Molly Taylor.
Yeah. How can businesses leverage the talent that Australian businesses leverage the talent overseas?
Yeah, I mean, that's from my own perspective, and I'm sure it's been different for so many people, but it is a challenge. I mean, I moved over to the UK when I was 21. Actually, at the time, where I'm going with this, there was a Australian Motorsport Foundation that was, helping fund. It was Joey Mawson and
Joey.
Atkinson.
So yes, I was where Molly's going is I was the general manager of the Australian Motorsport
And I kept
Foundation.
ringing him up asking him for money, basically.
Yeah.
And then would ring him up as I was, broke in the UK, saying, "Will someone help me?" But that foundation honestly got me off the ground. At the start, it was like a supporters club. I rang around every business I knew and didn't know and asked for $500 and put their name on the bonnet of my car so it looked like a NASCAR.
That's what McLaren are doing at the moment.
Yeah. So it was,
For a bit more than $500 though. I think Zach Brown, knowing him well, has done very well selling all those
spaces on that car anymore.
To that. But honestly, being from Australia, it is challenging because a lot of, particularly on the off-road side, it's a bit different in the Formula 1 side, but from the off-road side, it doesn't have as big a presence in Australia. So for a company that is just marketing solely in Australia, you have to try and find a angle to provide that value back. It works really well for some companies that are Aussie-based and expanding overseas. So, I mean, Quadlock is a great example of the work we do, the car mount phone case brand. They started in Melbourne and now they're expanding, so we do work with them. So there are some really good opportunities, but I'm not going to lie, it's difficult to compete, I guess, with all the other options for sponsorship. And I think Sam was mentioning it earlier about that shift that you're seeing in the willingness to sponsor someone to tick a box to be like, yeah, we sponsor a girl too, look at us, and just kind of part with what's left over at the end of the marketing budget rather than a concerted, this is part of our strategy and this is what it's going to take to do it well. So I think we're still kind of in that transition. But from what can be delivered, I think it's, well, as Michael was saying, it's such a unique opportunity, not only to showcase the technology, the performance, all of those aspects, but the excitement and the community, the human story, and that well, I want to say money can't buy, but I guess money can buy experience. But something that's like a once in a lifetime, to be able to get there on the ground, in the thick of it, be involved, provide that connection. I think particularly from a business perspective, that's also like really powerful grounding to be able to develop those relationships. And yeah, then from a more audience media brand perspective, to be involved in something that's, yeah, just a bit off the charts really in terms of the excitement and the level everyone's pushing and the amount of emotion and passion that goes into trying to get that job done, and with all the highs and the lows, like you ride this massive roller coaster, and that's a really cool journey that creates a lot of loyalty from the fans, but then also brand loyalty too.
Yeah. Before we wrap, Michael, I wanted to talk to you about sports, how sports have become entertainment, and it's particularly, you've been the storm of that fandom, the content creator economy explosion, all that stuff, because you had so many eyes on you working in Formula One in your position. What are your thoughts on how the sport has become entertainment? Because we've got a special video to show shortly, but I'm curious on the impact it's had on the sport, in your opinion.
I think it's amazing. I think Molly touched on it just then with a couple of the words, that there's a couple of key elements there that have always been there for motorsport, but just they're more broadly recognised. Passion, the emotion that comes out in it, and people following drivers, cars, people following engineers even these days. So we're very fortunate as a sport that it's one of those sports that evokes that passion and emotion probably like no other on a global scale. You have each of your domestic leagues and so forth that go on, but someone's a fan of Man United or whatever in the EPL, or Juventus in the Italian league, or the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL in America. Like, it depends on what sport you are and where you are. But I think on a global footprint, and credit where credit's due, since Liberty purchased the commercial rights of Formula One, they've done an amazing job in commercialising it and opening it up for the masses, utilising all the forms of social media to engage a crowd, and that shows with the diversity of people. The
amount of TikToks we do at the track is quite hilarious these days.
Exactly. So you look at it from that perspective and that activation of it. There's without the fans, without passionate fans, there is no sport.
Yeah.
And that for me has been the key part. The entertainment side of it. I used to use the example that each sport needs to know, or each discipline, in motorsport needs to have its brief. What does it want to be? The World Endurance Championship, it's about endurance. The manufacturers all showcasing their technology. Rallying is one at a time from ice to dust to roads. So, Formula One going from a mixture of road and permanent circuits. Formula E taking the electric technology to the centre of the city. So each category and discipline has its own point, and really there's some people that follow both, or all, some that just follow a particular area. So it's critical. That social media part, we wouldn't be here today in many regards talking about the future of motorsport and technology if it wasn't for those passionate fans around the world.
I think the fact that we're here at South by Southwest talking about it is testament to that.
Yeah, which brings us to the end of our chat, but we do have, you may have noticed last week, was it last week? I think it was last week. The Race of Champions was announced that it'll be coming to Sydney, which is a global stadium event that brings together all the legends of motorsport across a variety of categories. I think it's the only event that brings drivers from rally, NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, in one space where they get to compete. But we've got a video that we'll just show quickly. I mean, wow, it's about time Sydney got something fun. I can say that because I'm from Sydney. So could we just, this is like our final question as well, on the topic of future of motorsport, this kind of encompasses everything we've been talking about. There's a lot of sustainability elements to it. It's big stadium entertainment. It brings a whole variety of things. What does this mean for the future of motorsport, specifically in Australia, on the global stage? Because this is also a huge thing that's the first time it's come to the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely massive for this event to be coming to Australia. It's something that, I mean, I've watched every year. So, like, the audience, because you bring all the champions from all the different disciplines together in one place, and there's no other time that you really get an opportunity to do something like that. So it's really quite incredible. So the spectacle, as you can imagine, everyone wants to see, you know, how NASCAR goes against Formula One, goes against Indy, goes against World Rally and Rallycross. And then to bring it in a stadium, and then with the format, with the racing, so you've got basically head-to-head action. So the races, it's a bit of a knockout format. So you have, you know, 2 cars starting each side of the track, and it's a head-to-head. Bam, you knock one out, they have another race. So the action's very intense, it's constant. With all the legends of the motorsport arena, there's something for everyone. So for that to be coming to Australia, and for the drivers to be coming here, for then all the global audience, not just in Australia, to be watching what's happening in Australia, I think it's a huge opportunity and really, really exciting. I don't think we can kind of, you know, understate that as enough.
Yeah. What does that say about us to be chosen, Michael?
It's amazing, and you look at it from, you know, having an Olympic stadium here, but where it's happened before from a facility perspective, the Birdcage in Beijing, Wembley Stadium, Stade de France, you know, we're in that echelon of being amongst those amazing places around the world, and really bringing motorsport to the people, let's call it, and particularly here, in the environment they're used to. We had the Rugby League Grand Final there a couple of weeks ago, so having that bespoke circuit and facility being built in the middle of a core stadium is going to be quite cool. And yeah, I think it's going to be great to watch. And I'm going to be super interested to see who the team at Race of Champions brings along to compete on a global and participate at a global scale, but also representing Team Australia ultimately.
Yeah, and it's the head of the Melbourne Grand Prix. So like I said, Sydney gets a fun motorsport event. We have things in Adelaide, Gold Coast, Bathurst, Melbourne gets sort of things, so it'll be fun. But that's time for us. So I just want to thank please join me in thanking the panel for giving their time. And thank you to everybody for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.